Welcome. I'd like to cover a few vector drawing basics in After Effects for my students. So you have some drawing tools in After Effects, and it makes sense to do some drawing. I will add arrows to things. I will add lines to point something out. You can draw shapes in here as well. I think on here I'll mostly deal with drawing with a pen tool today. And if you're familiar at all with drawing in Illustrator, you have some similar tools. You have a pen tool, add and subtract points. You can this convert tool here adds like handles to it, so you can make a smoother line. So we'll deal with some of these basics here. For me, when I first started out in After Effects, the most confusing part was after I draw the line, how do I edit it by looking at the layers in here? So we'll deal with some of that. Okay, so on my pen tool, I don't have any layers selected, and that's important because if you do have layers selected, any drawing tools will create a mask over those layers. So make sure, now I don't have any layers here, but if you do have layers or a video up or an image or something, deselect all the layers. So let's just draw a line here. I'm just going to click and click, draw a simple line there. And now if you go down here, you see that it has added a little star shape layer. So let's expand that layer, and you will see you have what you might become familiar with or may already be familiar with, which would be transform. And this is where you can change things like the opacity of your line, the position, scale, rotation. We're going to deal with the contents right now. So in the contents, and this is where it can be a little bit confusing in here, is you have all these options in here. So first of all, let's just add some value to our line. I like to use these up here. You can do similar things down here, but for right now I like to use these. So for the fill, there's a white fill on the line. I don't want a fill because it's just a line. So I'm going to click the color box, and you'll notice in here that I can't select none, and there's only an option to choose a color. So let's cancel that. What you have to do is you have to click on the word fill. They could probably do a better job with this, but this is how it is right now. So this is where you would add a solid, or you could do a linear gradient, radial gradient, or click none. You can also change the opacity in here too. You can see I had drawn a line earlier and set it to 66%. So I'm going to click none for my fill and OK. And now you see you have none in here. For the stroke, let's click on the stroke, and you can see you can do gradients, solids, and stuff on the stroke if you want, and change the opacity as well. I'm going to click on the color because I want to put a color on here. Let's just put this red right here. Now, if I do want this to be a little bit thicker than what I have, I can just go over here on the size. I can type it in, or so if let's just say I want 20, or I can, once I click on this, I can actually hover over this, and I have a slider to help me with the stroke. So let's go all the way maybe to 99 there. So down here, we're going to go here. This is where it gets a touch confusing too, where path, you can make adjustments to the path, but let's go into the stroke, because the stroke is where you will find these controls up here, and these will help you. You can set the color in here, the opacity, the stroke width. You can do the same things, but there's a couple more features that I use quite often. And again, you might be familiar with these if you're somebody who draws in Illustrator. The line cap. This is a butt cap in here. This is basically just a square end where it goes right to the end of your point here and your anchor point and makes a straight end. A couple options you have is we could do a round cap, which I prefer, or you could project it past it like this if you wanted to. Sometimes if you have another object here that has a stroke on it, that's helpful. But what I usually do with my lines, just to make them look a little more finished, is I will use the round cap, and that puts a nice rounded end on it. So if you do reduce your size, the width, the round part stays with it, which is nice. Okay, so that would be the cap. The join line here, the miter join. Well, I tell you what. First, let's just. All I did there is I held my command key down to get my selection clicked in the background, so I don't have anything now. So now I'm back on here. Let's close this up, and I want to show you what will happen here. Let's say I want to draw an arrow. I'm going to click up here and come down here, and we'll come back over here. All right, so now I've just drawn an arrow. So notice that put a separate shape layer on here, and that separate shape layer can be controlled individually of this. And that might be helpful if you want to maybe animate this separately, have it be part of a different layer for some reason. But I'm going to just take this layer 2, shape layer 2, and I'm just going to delete that. What I usually prefer to do is select this layer, and you can put additional paths on the same layer. So I have my pen tool selected, I have this layer selected, so I'm not deselecting everything. And now if I want to just add my arrow end, I'll just click here, here, and here. And notice what it has done now is inside of this shape layer, it's just put another line called shape 2. So if I want some clarity here, I can just drag this down here. So shape 1 is the line to my arrow, and shape 2 is now the end to my arrow. Let's open up shape 2, and notice that since I was already drawing, we're going into stroke here. Since I was already drawing with a 99 point stroke width in a red line, it remembered that and it just continued with that. Now I still have these butt caps here, so I'm going to change these butt caps to round caps so they match the roundness of this. And I'm also going to come down here now, and this miter join, this is basically just the end part of this. If I want to move this, let me go up here. If I want to move just this section here, the arrowhead, I am going to go up here to my just selection tool, and then I can just click. When I'm in here, I have shape 1 and shape 2. Just click on shape 2, and now I can just move this around. I'm using my arrow keys. So I can move this down so I align it a little bit better. And that allows me to just move one of these. If I wanted to move shape 1, I'd click on that, and I can use my arrow keys if I want to. I can also grab it and move it as well. So you have to make sure you're down here clicking on the individual shape that represents the shape that you drew. This also is why sometimes I will draw these lines or these separate paths so that they interact separately and I can edit them separately. So let me just make sure I line that up, my line there. And then you see how the arrow has a point to it right here? Well, this miter joint, this line join here, if I choose round, it will round all of the curves and angles in my drawing. So now that's rounded. Now everything looks like it kind of goes together. Okay, so one last time through these. We drew two separate shapes. If I go to the path level underneath my shape here, the path, that will allow me to do the individual anchor points and manipulate these, adjust these as I need to. If I go to the stroke and open that up, that allows me to set all the different attributes of color, opacity, the width, and this is also where I did my the rounded corners here and the rounded caps on the end. And if I go up to shape here, shape is going to allow me to grab this entire thing. This can get a little bit tricky because here I have two lines. So notice when I hover over this right here where I have the solid arrow with a tail on it and a white outline, that will allow me to grab this both shapes or the entire shape. If I hover just over the line here, that line is going to allow me to just drag this line out. And it gets all wavy because it has the handles on it. So if I wanted to, on just this shape, I have to keep that in mind. Looking at my arrow, am I grabbing the line where it's just the black arrow without the tail on it? Or is it this arrow that allows me to grab the entire piece? Now, to make things even more complicated, but also you get this, is if I go to shape 1 is just one line. So all I can do is grab that one line with my black arrow with no tail, and that will allow me to move it up. If I come up here and try to grab this with my tail, or my arrow with a tail, it goes back to grab the whole thing. So just be patient and realize that you have to come in here and find the path and the stroke. And then to get all of this together, if I close the whole thing, now if I go to my shape layer, now I have the entire piece, the entire arrow that I can adjust this way. All right, thank you.